Good evening. Just yesterday, an international group of vaccine experts, including officials from both the FDA as well as the WHO, they published this article right here in the Lancet Medical Journal, suggesting that there is no evidence that the general population needs to get COVID vaccine booster shots. Meanwhile, over in Singapore, a 16-year-old boy who suffered a heart attack just days after he got the Pfizer vaccine, he was just awarded a $225,000 settlement from the Singapore government. This came after an investigation determined that what happened to him was very likely an adverse reaction to the vaccine. Meanwhile, back here in America, the director of the CDC, she just announced yesterday that they are in the process of approving the vaccine for kids aged 11 to 15 years old. And then lastly, a hospital system over in Michigan, they just released this statement here saying that if workers can prove that they have natural immunity to COVID, meaning that if they have their own natural antibodies, then they are exempt from the vaccine mandate. Let's go through it all together. This is your daily Facts Matter update, and I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. And now let's begin today's discussion by talking about the vaccine, specifically about the booster shots. So just yesterday, an international group of vaccine experts, including officials from both the FDA as well as the WHO, they came out and they said that there is no evidence which suggests that the general population needs to get COVID vaccine booster shots. Going even further, these vaccine experts wrote an article which was published in the Lancet Medical Journal wherein they issued a warning. They said that if booster shots are introduced too soon, they may actually cause more side effects in the general population, things like myocarditis as well as Guillain-Barré syndrome. Now, in this paper, the authors actually noted that the vaccines are able to offer protection against severe COVID cases. And even though they said that there was a drop in the efficacy of these vaccines over time, specifically in regards to the Delta variant, they wrote this, quote, "Current evidence does not appear to show a need for boosting in the general population in which efficacy against severe disease remains high. Even if boosting were eventually shown to decrease the medium-term risk of serious disease, current vaccine supplies could save more lives if used in previously unvaccinated populations." Furthermore, they wrote that booster shots could lead to more harmful side effects in the general population, which they cautioned is a poorly understood phenomenon. Here's specifically what they wrote on that front, quote, "There could be risks if boosters are widely introduced too soon or too frequently, especially with vaccines that can have immunomediated side effects such as myocarditis, which is more common after the second dose of some mRNA vaccines, or Guillain-Barré syndrome, which has been associated with adenovirus vectored COVID-19 vaccines." And then furthermore, these authors argued that if this scenario were to play out, meaning that if boosters were administered to the general population and they were in fact met with some of these serious side effects that they're describing, they said that this would negatively affect people's trust in vaccines in general. Here's what they said on this front. "If unnecessary boosting causes significant adverse reactions, there could be implications for vaccine acceptance that go beyond COVID-19 vaccines." Now, we here at the Epoch Times, we reached out to the FDA for comment on this paper, but we have yet to hear back. However, it is worth noting that among the authors of this article in the Lancet Journal, there was Dr. Marian Gruber as well as Dr. Phil Krause, both of whom are top officials over at the FDA who are in charge of both regulating and approving vaccines. They are quite literally two of the FDA's most senior vaccine officials. And interestingly, just 2 weeks ago, both Dr. Gruber as well as Dr. Krause, they announced their resignations from the department. Here's how the FDA's former acting chief scientist, here's how she described their departure on Twitter. "The FDA is losing two giants who helped bring us many safe and effective vaccines over decades of public service." Now, these two officials have now publicly released a statement saying specifically why they are choosing to leave the FDA. However, the timing of their departure is interesting. In fact, a former senior leader within the FDA, they told a publication called Endpoints that these two scientists are leaving because they're frustrated that the CDC and their ACIP committee are involved in decisions that they think should be up to the FDA. What finally did it for them was the White House getting ahead of the FDA on booster shots. Now, what that official is specifically referring to is the fact that the current administration is set to roll out booster shots as early as next week on September the 20th. Which, according to this article here in The Lancet, which is co-authored by Dr. Gruber as well as Dr. Krause, they disagree with that idea. And again, we did reach out to the FDA, but we did not hear back. But if you would like to read this article that was published in the Lancet for yourself, I'll throw it into the description box below this video so you can dig into the details for yourself. And all I ask in return is that you take a quick second to smash that like button, which will help push out this video to thousands of more people via the YouTube algorithm. And now let's move on over to Singapore. Over in Singapore, there was a 16-year-old boy who had a heart attack just a few days after he received his first dose of the Pfizer vaccine. Now, the Ministry of Health over in Singapore, they investigated the matter and they just officially ruled that this young man is eligible for a $225,000 settlement. What happened is that their panel of doctors, they concluded that the acute myocarditis, which led to the cardiac arrest, was likely a response to the first dose of the Pfizer vaccine. Here's in fact part of a statement from the Ministry of Health over in Singapore. The myocarditis was likely a serious adverse event arising from the COVID-19 vaccine he received, which might have been aggravated by his strenuous lifting of weights and his high consumption of caffeine through energy drinks and supplements. It seems like he was an active young man. Now, in terms of how this boy is actually doing, according to this statement from the Ministry of Health, he is getting better, but he will require continued treatment as well as rehabilitation. Here's what it says, quote, "He's making good progress and can perform his activities of daily living without assistance. The independent clinical panel appointed to assess and adjudicate the Vaccine Injury Financial Assistance Program application found that while he has made good improvement, because his condition was severe and critical, he will require treatment and rehabilitation for some time yet to continue his recovery." Now, we did discuss all the way back in June of this year, so about 3 months ago now, that the FDA added a warning to the fact sheets for both the Moderna and the Pfizer shots, warning people of an increased risk of heart inflammation, particularly for young men. Here's what that FDA warning said. The FDA is announcing revisions to the patient and provider fact sheets for the Moderna and Pfizer biotech COVID-19 vaccines regarding the suggested increased risks of myocarditis, the inflammation of the heart muscle, and pericarditis, inflammation of the tissue surrounding the heart following vaccination. And so, according to this official statement from Singapore's Ministry of Health, they determined, after doing an investigation, that in regards to the 16-year-old young man, the myocarditis was likely a serious adverse event arising from the COVID-19 vaccine he received. Furthermore, according to this statement, this young man will be awarded $225,000 in financial assistance through Singapore's VIFAP, which is their Vaccine Injury Financial Assistance Program, which is similar to America's CICP program, which we discussed in an earlier episode. If you'd like to read more about this case over in Singapore, I'll throw a link to that article into the description box below this video for you to check out. And now, let's move on over back to America and discuss a recent statement that was made by the CDC director about the work that is currently being done to approve the vaccine for young children. Sir, what's this?
That's a great question, Roman, and it is today's sponsor, which is an awesome messaging app called Secure. And it's awesome if you actually care about your privacy, because it's not a big secret that our data is being mined and remined by all these big tech companies. And in the year 2020, over 155 million Americans, likely including you and me, were affected by data breaches. And by the way, that's only what's publicly known. However, with Secure, all that stuff that happened in the past, it's in the past because your emails and messages moving forward can remain private. That's because they have their servers and data centers located right here in Kabul, Afghanistan. No, I'm just kidding. They actually have their data centers and servers here in Switzerland. Now, why does that matter? Well, Switzerland has some of the strictest data privacy laws in the entire world, and they're not subject to the Cloud Act. And if you want to know what that is, head on over to secure.com under their FAQ section, and they explain exactly what that is. Now, the thing that I love most about them is that they don't collect your phone number, they don't collect your private data, they don't mine your data, they don't collect the phone numbers of your friends and family. Instead, everything is private. And best of all, if your friends and family don't use the Secure app, it doesn't matter, because the way it works is all your messages are still routed through Switzerland and everything remains private almost no matter what. So head on over to secure.com and use promo code Roman to get 25% off. And the rates aren't even that expensive to start with. It's only $5 for the Messenger and $10 for the email and Messenger combo. And they offer a 7-day free trial. So head on over to secure.com, use promo code Roman to get 25% off, and now Roman in the studio, back to you.
Just yesterday, Dr. Rochelle Walensky, who is the director of the CDC, she said that her federal agency is currently working to approve a COVID vaccine for young children, specifically those between the ages of 5 and 11 years old. During an interview on the Today Show, here's specifically what she said. "We're waiting for the companies to submit the data to the FDA. We're anticipating that will happen in the fall. We will look at that data from the FDA, from the CDC, with the urgency that we all feel for getting our kids vaccinated, and we're hoping by the end of the year. For your reference, by the way, at this current moment today, the FDA has granted emergency use authorization to vaccinate children between the ages of 12 to 17 years old. However, for kids who are aged 5 to 11 years old, there are currently no vaccination options available, at least not for the moment. Now, Dr. Walensky's comments seem to be aligned with a statement that was released by the FDA just last week, which said that the agency will carefully examine data on younger children as soon as it becomes available to them. Here's what that earlier statement by the FDA said. The FDA is prepared to complete its review as quickly as possible, likely in a matter of weeks rather than months. The agency's ability to review these submissions rapidly will depend in part on the quality and timeliness of the submissions by manufacturers. Now, what is interesting to note here is that these comments from both the FDA as well as the CDC, they appear to be in stark contrast to what is happening over in the UK. That's because the United Kingdom's advisory body on vaccination, they have just decided to not recommend universal vaccination for kids below the age of 16. In a statement that this committee released, and this committee, by the way, is called the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunization, and in the statement, they said that they are taking a precautionary approach because children, they have a very low risk of getting seriously ill from the virus. Here's part of what this statement said, quote, "Given this very low risk, considerations on the potential harms and benefits of vaccination are very finely balanced." This statement then further added that in regards to the safety of the Pfizer vaccine, this committee said that, quote, "There is increasingly robust evidence of an association between vaccination with mRNA COVID-19 vaccines and myocarditis." They then said that while these adverse reactions are both very rare and most of them are very short term, they added that, quote, "The clinical picture is atypical and the medium to long-term, months to years prognosis, including the possibility of persistence of tissue damage resulting from the inflammation, is currently uncertain as sufficient follow-up time has not yet occurred." However, even though this statement recommends against the universal vaccination of healthy 12 to 15-year-olds, it does recommend giving the vaccine to kids who have underlying health conditions. And so, for instance, if you have a 12 to 15-year-old kid in the UK who has things like sickle cell disease, type 1 diabetes, Down syndrome, or a congenital heart disease, this committee does in fact recommend that they get the shot since they are at more of a risk for getting a severe reaction from the virus. Now, if you would like to read either these comments from the UK Advisory Board or the comments from the CDC or the FDA, I'll throw all that into the description box below this video, so that way you can read them both, get both sides of the picture, and make up your own mind as to what you believe. And all I ask in return is that you take a quick moment to smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. And now let's move on over to Michigan. According to an announcement that was just made 2 days ago, workers over at Spectrum Health, which is a Michigan-based hospital system, they can avoid the vaccine mandate if they can prove that they have natural immunity to the virus. Here's part of what a statement said that was released by Spectrum Health just a few days ago. Quote, "While we still recommend vaccination for people with prior COVID infection, according to this new research, there is increasing evidence that natural infection affords protection from COVID-19 reinfection and severe symptoms for a period of time, although current studies are not clear on how long natural immunity protects from reinfection." Now, in the statement, it's not exactly clear which study they're making reference to, although it's very likely that study which came out of Israel, the one that we discussed in yesterday's episode, which found that natural immunity affords up to potentially 13 times more protection against the Delta variant than does the vaccine. Here's specifically what those researchers over in Israel, here's what they found. This analysis demonstrated that natural immunity affords longer lasting and stronger protection against infection, symptomatic disease, and hospitalization due to the Delta variant. However, as we did mention in that earlier episode, and as they alluded to in this statement, it's not exactly clear how long this natural immunity lasts for. Because according to some of the data in that Israeli study, it seems to suggest that natural immunity, just like the vaccine protection, it wanes over time, which is a phenomenon that was addressed by Dr. Fauci when he was asked about this whole thing over on CNN. Here's what he said. "The one thing that paper from Israel didn't tell you is whether or not, as high as the protection is with natural infection, was the durability compared to the durability of a vaccine. So it is conceivable that you got infected, you're protected, but you may not be protected for an indefinite period of time." Although it's worth noting that what Dr. Fauci said about natural immunity can also be said of the vaccines, because according to multiple studies published by the CDC, the vaccines have decreased efficacy over time. However, it's also worth pointing out that this study out of Israel is not the only one which came to the conclusion that natural immunity, both exists and is very strong. In fact, there was another study that was conducted by researchers over at Emory University, and then later it was published in a medical journal called the Cell Reports Medicine. And that study, it found that individuals who have natural immunity, they display both long as well as robust protection against COVID. Here's in fact what Dr. Rafi Ahmed, who is the director over at Emory's Vaccine Center, he's also the lead author of the study, here's what he said. We saw that antibody responses, especially IgG antibodies, were not only durable in the vast majority of patients, but decayed at a slower rate than previously estimated, which suggests that patients are generating longer-lived plasma cells that can neutralize the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein. Which actually brings us back full circle to this policy statement that was issued by Spectrum Health over in Michigan. According to the statement, workers will have to submit to an antibody test in order to prove that they are actually immune. And then if that antibody test comes back and they are found to have the natural antibodies for COVID, they will be exempt from the vaccine mandate. If you'd like to read more about this statement from Spectrum Health, or also if you'd like to read either the Israel study or the study out of Emory University, I'll throw all that into the description box below so you can dive deeper into all the source material for yourself. And all I ask in return is that you take a quick moment again to smash that like button. Now lastly, I would like to make a small announcement similar to what I announced about 2 weeks ago. If you still watch television, I mean like over the air, cable, sitting in your living room on a couch with your family watching the tube-style television, well, I have very good news for you, because you can now watch our program Facts Matter on TV, specifically on NTD. Now, NTD, it's an awesome cable news network. They're actually a sister medium to the Epoch Times, and they report the news in a solid, professional manner without all of the spin and the false narratives that you get from the other cable news networks. I mean, they're basically a great alternative to the CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, CBS monopoly that you have on cable news, and now you can watch our program on their 7 p.m. Eastern time slot. Now, they are still growing. Currently, you can watch NTD in 32 different states, but they also have coverage over Wi-Fi on both Roku as well as Apple TV. And so if you would like to see how you can watch them, whether they're actually carried by your cable provider, you can just go on over to ntd.com/TV. I'll throw a link to it in the description box below as well. Then you just type in your zip code and figure out how you can watch them. And also, if you figure out that you're actually unable to watch them over cable, well, consider just giving a call to your cable provider and saying, hey, I would like you to carry NTD. Surprisingly, they actually listen to those suggestions. Again, I'll throw a link to that ntd.com/TV in the description box below. Now, lastly, if you haven't already, smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe to this YouTube channel if you haven't already in order to get this type of honest news content delivered directly into your YouTube feed while YouTube still allows it. Also, hit that notification bell, because otherwise YouTube seems to not inform people of videos as we upload them. And then lastly, if you have an Instagram account, consider following me at Epoch Times Roman. I follow behind-the-scenes research as well as spicy memes. And then, until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed and stay free.